Have you ever driven down a road so empty that you could hear your own heartbeat? A road where the silence feels alive, watching you, waiting for you to make one wrong turn? What if I told you that some roads don't just lead nowhere, they lead to something that should have stayed hidden? Something that turns the phrase, "we are what we eat," into the most terrifying truth you'll ever hear? Before we dive into the story, if you love spine-chilling tales that will make you question every shadow in the woods, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another terrifying story. And hey, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm curious to know who's brave enough to watch this alone in the dark. Now let's continue with the story. Jake Morrison had driven 18-wheelers for 23 years, but nothing prepared him for what he found on Highway 47 that October night. The Alabama backroad stretched like a black snake through pine forests, so thick they swallowed the moonlight whole. His headlights cut through fog that rolled across the asphalt like ghostly fingers reaching for something lost. At first, he thought the car was just another breakdown. A rusty sedan sat crooked on the shoulder, driver door hanging open like a broken jaw. Jake pulled over, his truck's air brakes hissing in the silence. The moment he stepped out, the smell hit him. Not gasoline or burnt rubber, but something organic, like meat, left too long in the Sunday. The steering wheel told a story Jake wished he'd never read. Deep gouges scarred the leather, not from tools or keys, but from teeth, human teeth, judging by the pattern. Blood, long dried to rust brown, painted the dashboard in arterial sprays. But it was the drawing that made Jake's stomach turn. Stuck to the windshield with what looked like saliva was a child's drawing. Crayon stick figures held hands in a circle, but their mouths were red scribbles, opening too wide, and smaller figures lay inside the circle with X marks for eyes. At the bottom, in shaky letters, "Family dinner time." Jake reached for his radio to call it in, but static filled the channel. Through the white noise, he could have sworn he heard children singing, their voices high and sweet and wrong. The fog pressed closer, and in the tree line, shadows moved with purpose. He ran back to his truck, slamming the door as something scraped along the trailer. In his mirror, he saw them. Small figures emerging from the woods, walking wrong, like their joints bent in places joints shouldn't bend. They surrounded the abandoned car, and Jake heard the metal groan as they began to feed. He drove through the night without stopping, but the image burned into his mind. Those weren't children, not anymore. And that car? The police found it the next morning, stripped clean of every trace of blood, flesh, and evidence. Only the drawing remained, and a message scratched into the hood. "The Utah family sends their regards." The drawing haunted Jake for 3 days before he finally walked into the Cullman County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Roy Hensley looked like he'd aged 10 years in the span of Jake describing what he'd seen. The old lawman's hands trembled as he locked the office door and pulled down the blinds. "You saw them?" Roy whispered, not a question, but a confession. After 40 years, they're back. Jake watched the sheriff pour whiskey with shaking hands, downing one glass before pouring another. The man who'd kept order in these parts for decades suddenly looked small, frightened, like a child who'd seen monsters under the bed and learned they were real. "The Utah family came to Alabama in 1982, Roy began, his voice rough. "Claimed they were escaping religious persecution out west, needed a place to start fresh. Town council gave them land deep in the forest, thought we were being charitable. God help us, we had no idea what we were inviting in." The sheriff pulled out a locked drawer, revealing yellowed photographs that made Jake's blood run cold. Pictures of a family, but wrong. The parents' eyes held no warmth, only hunger. The children, 7 of them, smiled too wide, their teeth filed to points. But it was the background that turned Jake's stomach. Bones, arranged like decorations around their cabin. Human bones. First, pets started disappearing, then hitchhikers. When the Donovan boy went missing, we formed a search party. What we found in that cabin, Roy's voice broke. They weren't just killing Jake. They were keeping them alive, feeding on them piece by piece. And the children, those goddamn children, they developed a taste for it, preferred it. Roy showed Jake a file marked confidential. Inside, testimonies from survivors who'd escaped the Utah property. Stories of underground rooms where victims were stored, like livestock. Descriptions of family meals where grace was said over screaming prey. Reports of the children hunting in coordination, using sounds no human throat should make. We couldn't arrest them. No judge would believe it. So we did what we had to. Burned their cabin, ran them into the wilderness, told everyone they'd died in the fire. But we knew better. Sometimes we'd find remains, always stripped clean, always with those tiny teeth marks. We just prayed they'd stay hidden, maybe die out. Jake's mind raced. But it's been 40 years. Those kids would be adults now. Roy's laugh was bitter. You don't understand. They weren't right to begin with. The Utah family, they'd been practicing their ways for generations. Brother marrying sister, father laying with daughter. Keeping the bloodline pure, they called it. Keeping their gift strong. Each generation got worse, more animalistic. What you saw wasn't the children, it was their children. The sheriff stood, checking his weapon. They're not hiding anymore, Jake. That message on the car? That's a declaration. They're ready to feed again, and this time, they're not staying in the shadows. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky the color of blood. And somewhere in the Alabama darkness, the Utah family was waking up, teaching their young the old ways, preparing for a feast 40 years in the making. Park Ranger Sarah Chen had worked the Bankhead National Forest for 15 years, but the call that came through her radio that morning made her question everything she thought she knew about these woods. Hikers reported strange sounds coming from the old growth section, rhythmic tapping that echoed through the trees like some kind of code. Sarah found the first tree 3 miles off the main trail. An ancient oak, thick as a car, with a hole carved into its base just large enough for a person to crawl through. The smell hit her before she even bent down to look inside. Death, yes, but mixed with something else, something chemical, like the preservatives her grandmother used to pickle vegetables, but wrong, corrupted. Her flashlight beam revealed a sight that would haunt her dreams forever. Bones, human bones, arranged in perfect spirals along the inner walls of the hollow tree. Finger bones formed delicate patterns. Ribs created shelving, and at the center, a skull, child-sized, with every tooth sharpened to a point. Fresh scratches in the wood formed words. Storage Unit 7. Sarah stumbled backward, her radio crackling with static. Through the interference, she heard it. Children singing, the same hymn from old church services, but the words were different. Instead of bringing in the sheaves, they sang bringing in the meat. The melody drifted from deeper in the forest, and Sarah realized with growing horror that the tapping wasn't random. It was communication. She marked the tree and pushed deeper into the woods, following a trail of disturbed earth. Every 100 yards, another hollowed tree, another storage unit. Some held bones, decades old, others disturbingly fresh. Tree number 12 contained something worse. Photographs, driver's licenses, wedding rings, trophies from victims spanning 50 years. The Utah family hadn't just survived in these woods, they'd thrived. But it was the 13th tree that revealed the true scope of the nightmare. Sarah's light caught metal at the base, a hatch disguised with moss and bark. She pulled it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. The tapping grew louder, coming from below. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Sarah descended. The tunnel system defied logic. Carved from earth and reinforced with bones, it stretched in every direction like veins beneath the forest floor. The walls pulsed with that rhythmic tapping, and Sarah realized it wasn't just communication, it was navigation. The Utah family had evolved in darkness, using sound like sonar to move through their underground kingdom. She found the first chamber 20 feet down. Sleeping areas carved into walls, lined with fur that didn't come from any animal. Children's toys made from human bones, and on a rough table, fresh meat, still warm. Sarah's light caught movement in a connecting tunnel. Eyes, too many eyes, reflecting like stars in the darkness. The tapping stopped. The silence was worse. Sarah ran, scrambling up the ladder as sounds erupted behind her. Not footsteps, but something faster. Bodies that moved on all fours, using the walls and ceiling as easily as the floor. She burst into daylight, slamming the hatch shut and running for her vehicle. Behind her, the forest erupted with that horrible singing, coming from every direction. The Utah family wasn't just hiding in the woods. They were the woods, spreading beneath the earth like a cancer, connected by tunnels that touched every corner of Alabama wilderness. And now they knew someone had found them. Martha Whitfield had kept her silence for 40 years, but the news reports of missing hikers finally broke her resolve. At 93, she figured she had little left to lose. Sheriff Hensley sat in her living room, recorder running, as she finally told the story that had stolen 4 decades of sleep. I was 53 when I saw them hunt. Martha began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Walking home from my shift at the diner, taking the shortcut through Palmer's Field. The moon was full that night, bright enough to see everything. Too bright. Some things should stay hidden in darkness. She described how the Utah children moved through the tall grass like predators born to it. 7 of them, ranging from maybe 6 to 16, though their ages were hard to judge. Their bodies were wrong, joints that bent too far, necks that turned almost completely around. They communicated through clicks and whistles that made her teeth ache. They were stalking the Hendricks boy. Poor child was walking home from baseball practice, had no idea death was matching his pace just 30 feet away. They moved like a wolf pack, spreading out, cutting off escape routes he didn't even know he needed. But it was their patience that terrified me most. They could have taken him any time, but they waited, savoring the hunt. Martha's eyes went distant, seeing that night again. When they finally struck, it wasn't human. One moment the boy was walking, the next he was on the ground, all 7 of them on him like flies on honey. But they didn't kill him. That's what people need to understand. Death would have been mercy. She explained how they worked with surgical precision, each child having a role. The smallest ones held him down with strength that defied their size. The older ones began their work, not with tools, but with those filed teeth and fingers that had grown hard as bone. They took pieces, small pieces, keeping him conscious, keeping him fresh. They sang while they fed, Martha whispered, church hymns with words that would make the devil himself weep. And the boy, God help him, he was still aware. They wanted him aware. Fear makes the meat taste better, the oldest girl said. I'll never forget her voice, sweet as Sunday school but hollow underneath. Sheriff Hensley asked why she never reported it. Martha's laugh was bitter. I tried. Went straight to the police station, covered in my own vomit from what I'd seen. The deputy on duty took one look at me and called the sheriff, but when he came, it wasn't to take my statement. It was to tell me that if I valued my life, I'd forget what I saw. She revealed the town's dark secret. The Utah family had leverage, evidence of things the town fathers had done, crimes that would destroy Cullman County's reputation. In exchange for silence and isolation, they kept the town's secrets. A devil's bargain paid in blood. But here's what haunts me most, Martha continued. As they dragged the boy away, still breathing, still crying for his mother, one of them looked right at me. A little girl, couldn't have been more than 8. She smiled and waved, like we were friends, like I'd just watched her play hopscotch instead of, and she spoke, clear as day across that field. We know where you live, Miss Martha. We know where everyone lives. Martha pulled out a shoebox, hands shaking. Inside, newspaper clippings spanning 40 years, missing persons, all within 50 miles. All matching the pattern, all covered up. They never stopped hunting. They just got better at hiding it, and now they're breeding, spreading. What I saw was second generation. What's out there now might not even be human anymore. Dr. Patricia Hayes had worked at the abandoned Bryce Hospital for only 3 months before discovering the locked wing. The psychiatric facility had closed in 1987, but she'd been hired to digitize the remaining records. What she found in filing room C would change everything the authorities thought they knew about the Utah family. The first file was labeled Project Purity and dated back to 1972, a full decade before the family arrived in Alabama. Inside, medical records that defied belief. The Utah family hadn't fled to Alabama. They'd been sent here, part of an experiment that began in the deserts of Nevada. Generation 1 exhibited remarkable genetic anomalies, the report read. Subjects show increased bone density, enhanced night vision, and digestive systems capable of processing raw protein with unprecedented efficiency. Recommendation: continue controlled breeding program. Patricia's hands shook as she read on. The family's inbreeding wasn't born of isolation or ignorance. It was deliberate, scientific, designed to concentrate specific genetic traits. Each generation was carefully documented. Brother paired with sister, parent with child, all to preserve and strengthen what the researchers called evolutionary advantages. The photographs made her retch. Children with eyes that reflected light, like nocturnal animals. Dental x-rays showing multiple rows of teeth, like sharks. Bone scans revealing skeletal structures that were gradually diverging from human norms. And brain scans, God, the brain scans. The parts that controlled empathy and social bonding were shrinking. The areas governing hunting instincts and pack behavior were enlarged beyond anything medical science had seen. Generation 2 shows marked improvement, another report noted. Subjects can survive on 1/10 the normal caloric intake if food source is living tissue. Preference for human protein suggests evolutionary specialization. Note: subjects must be isolated from general population. But it was the video reels that revealed the true horror. Patricia watched grainy footage of Utah children in clinical settings, demonstrating their capabilities. A 6-year-old girl bending steel bars with her teeth. A boy tracking prey by scent alone through a maze. Twin toddlers communicating through ultrasonic frequencies that made the recording equipment malfunction. The final report, dated just before the family's relocation to Alabama, was stamped with warnings. Project terminated. Subjects show increasing aggression and decreasing human recognition. They no longer see researchers as same species. Recommend immediate termination. But someone had written in the margin, too valuable. Relocate and monitor. Patricia found the monitoring reports. For 5 years, government observers tracked the family in Alabama. They documented the spreading tunnel system, the hunting patterns, the breeding cycles. They watched as Generation 3 was born, more creature than human. They recorded it all, did nothing to stop it, fascinated by the rapid evolution occurring before their eyes. The last entry was different, panicked. Lost contact with all observers. Satellite imagery shows tunnel network has expanded beyond projected parameters. Subjects appear to have bred outside the family unit. Contamination of local population possible. Requesting immediate intervention. No response was ever recorded. The program was abandoned, the hospital closed, the records locked away. But the Utah family remained, growing stronger, spreading wider, evolving faster. Patricia realized she wasn't looking at the history of a twisted family. She was looking at the birth of a new species, one that saw humanity not as kin, but as prey. She grabbed every file she could carry and ran for her car. Behind her, in the abandoned hospital corridors, she heard singing, that same hymn, Getting Closer. They knew someone had found their origin story, and they couldn't let that knowledge spread. Detective Ray Colton spread the missing persons files across his desk like a deck of cursed cards. 47 people vanished within a 30-mile radius over the past 2 years. The pattern was undeniable. All disappeared near the abandoned Cahaba mine shaft, a wound in the earth that hadn't been worked since 1964. The latest victim, Jennifer Walsh, had been hiking with friends when she'd stepped off the trail to relieve herself. Her friends heard a scream, then nothing. By the time they reached the spot where she'd been, only her torn backpack remained, teeth marks puncturing the fabric like it was tissue paper. Ray assembled a search team at dawn, ignoring the old-timers who warned him away. The mine entrance yawned like a hungry mouth, support beams rotted to black stumps. But it was the smell that made his team hesitate. Not the expected mustiness of abandoned places, but something organic, alive, like a den where predators drag their kills. 20 feet in, they found the first evidence. Camping gear, wallets, cell phones, arranged on natural shelves like trophies. Deeper still, clothing sorted by size, shoes paired neatly despite being from different victims. The Utah family wasn't just killing, they were collecting, organizing, preparing. The main shaft opened into a natural cavern that defied mapping. Ray's flashlight beam couldn't find the far wall, but it caught something worse. Bones, thousands of them, carpeted the floor like autumn leaves, some ancient, some fresh enough to glisten. A forensic anthropologist would later estimate the remains represented at least 200 individuals spanning 60 years. But the bones were just the beginning. Side chambers revealed the true horror of the feeding grounds. Bodies in various states of consumption, kept fresh by the cool underground air. Some showed signs of systematic harvesting, limbs removed with precision, wounds cauterized to prevent death. The Utah family had learned to make their food last. In one chamber, Ray found something that broke him. A makeshift nursery where victims were kept alive, fed just enough to survive while pieces were taken over weeks, months. Scratch marks on the walls told stories of madness, of people who'd begged for death as a mercy. One message carved deep with fingernails: "They make us watch them eat." The team pushed deeper, following drag marks that suggested recent activity. The tunnel system connected to the one Sarah had found, creating an underground highway beneath Alabama. Maps carved into stone showed the network's extent, reaching beneath towns, schools, hospitals, access points marked with symbols only the family would understand. Then they found the feeding chamber, a natural amphitheater where the family gathered for communal meals. Stone tables stained black with blood, primitive tools designed not for quick kills, but for careful extraction. And on the walls, cave paintings that predated the Utah family, showing this place had been used for such purposes far longer than anyone imagined. Ray heard them before he saw them. That clicking communication echoing from multiple tunnels. His team's radios burst with static, flashlights flickering as shapes moved just beyond the light. Too many shapes. The search team had walked into an occupied nest, and dinner time was approaching. "Fall back," Ray ordered, but the clicking surrounded them. In the beam of his dying flashlight, he saw them clearly for the first time. The Utah descendants, dozens of them, hanging from the ceiling like bats, crawling on walls with fingers and toes evolved for gripping stone. Their eyes had grown larger, pupils dilated permanently for darkness. Their bodies were lean, stretched, built for navigating tight spaces and bringing down prey. The youngest ones were the worst. Born in darkness, raised on human flesh, they looked at Ray's team with the innocent hunger of children eyeing candy. One tilted its head, studying Ray with curiosity, then smiled with too many teeth. The feeding grounds weren't just where they ate. It was where they were turning human into something else, one generation at a time. Captain Maria Santos led the tactical response team into the mine at 0600 hours, 20 officers armed with enough firepower to stop a small army. They'd studied Ray's footage, mapped the tunnel entrances, thought they were prepared. They were wrong. The first sign of trouble came 30 meters in. Private Collins, walking point, suddenly froze. "You hear that?" he whispered. Through their comms, the team heard it too. Children singing hymns, but the acoustics were impossible. The voices came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off stone in patterns that hurt to process. "They're not alone down here," Collins managed to say before the singing stopped. The silence was worse. In that quiet, they could hear breathing that wasn't their own, surrounding them in the darkness just beyond their tactical lights. Santos tried to radio base camp, but static filled the channel. Through the white noise, a child's voice emerged, crystal clear. "Welcome to our home. We've been so hungry, waiting so long for guests. Mother says we can keep you fresh for weeks." The team pushed forward into the main cavern, setting up a defensive position. Their lights created a circle of safety in an ocean of black. Motion sensors screamed warnings from every direction, but nothing appeared. The Utah family was testing them, learning their patterns, their weaknesses. Specialist Kim noticed it first. Their spare ammunition was gone. Packs opened from the bottom. Supplies vanished without anyone noticing. "They're with us," she breathed. "They've been with us the whole time." The first attack came from above. Bodies dropped from the ceiling like spiders, landing on 2 officers before anyone could react. Not to kill, but to disable, removing weapons with fingers that found every strap and buckle in darkness. By the time the team responded, the attackers had melted back into shadow, leaving their victims weaponless but alive. Santos understood their strategy. This wasn't a massacre. It was a hunt, and the Utah family wanted their prey to last. They were being herded deeper into the tunnels, away from escape, towards something worse than death. The team's formation broke when the floor collapsed beneath them. Not a cave-in, but a trap, dropping half the unit into a lower chamber. The screams that echoed up weren't from pain, but from what they saw down there. Santos heard Johnson's voice broken. "Oh God, they're children, just children." But their eyes, their teeth, they're crawling on the walls, they're everywhere. The singing started again, closer now. Santos saw them in her light for split seconds. Pale figures moving with impossible speed, using the cave topology like a jungle gym. Every time she aimed, they were gone. Her remaining team clustered together, but that's what the family wanted. Grouped prey was easier to control. Then the lights went out. Not malfunction, but systematic destruction. One by one, their tactical lights shattered, broken by thrown rocks with sniper precision. In the growing darkness, the clicking communication grew louder, more excited. The hunt was entering its final phase. Santos felt something brush past her in the blackness, gentle as a mother's touch. A child's voice whispered in her ear, "Don't worry. We keep the strong ones alive longest. You'll feed many generations. Your sacrifice will help us grow." Emergency flares revealed the nightmare. They were surrounded not by dozens, but by hundreds. The Utah family had grown beyond anyone's estimation, spreading through the underground like a virus, each generation more adapted to this life than the last. And behind them all, in a chamber that opened like a throat, Santos saw the matriarch. What had once been the eldest Utah daughter was now something evolution would have taken millions of years to create, perfected for one purpose: the continuation of the hunt. The last transmission base camp received was Santos screaming coordinates, begging for napalm strikes, for the entire mountain to be sealed. Then static, and underneath it, that eternal singing, promising that the hunt would never truly end. Captain Maria Santos led the tactical response team into the mine at 0600 hours, 20 officers armed with enough firepower to stop a small army. They'd studied Ray's footage, mapped the tunnel entrances, thought they were prepared. They were wrong. The first sign of trouble came 30 meters in. Private Collins, walking point, suddenly froze. "You hear that?" he whispered. Through their comms, the team heard it too. Children singing hymns, but the acoustics were impossible. The voices came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off stone in patterns that hurt to process. "They're not alone down here. Collins managed to say before the singing stopped. The silence was worse. In that quiet, they could hear breathing that wasn't their own, surrounding them in the darkness just beyond their tactical lights. Santos tried to radio base camp, but static filled the channel. Through the white noise, a child's voice emerged, crystal clear. "Welcome to our home. We've been so hungry, waiting so long for guests. Mother says we can keep you fresh for weeks." The team pushed forward into the main cavern, setting up a defensive position. Their lights created a circle of safety in an ocean of black. Motion sensors screamed warnings from every direction, but nothing appeared. The Utah family was testing them, learning their patterns, their weaknesses. Specialist Kim noticed it first. Their spare ammunition was gone. Packs opened from the bottom, supplies vanished without anyone noticing. "They're with us," she breathed. "They've been with us the whole time. The first attack came from above." Bodies dropped from the ceiling like spiders, landing on 2 officers before anyone could react. Not to kill, but to disable, removing weapons with fingers that found every strap and buckle in darkness. By the time the team responded, the attackers had melted back into shadow, leaving their victims weaponless but alive. Santos understood their strategy. This wasn't a massacre. It was a hunt, and the Utah family wanted their prey to last. They were being herded deeper into the tunnels, away from escape, towards something worse than death. The team's formation broke when the floor collapsed beneath them. Not a cave-in, but a trap, dropping half the unit into a lower chamber. The screams that echoed up weren't from pain, but from what they saw down there. Santos heard Johnson's voice, broken. "Oh God, they're children. Just children." But their eyes, their teeth, they're crawling on the walls. They're everywhere. The singing started again, closer now. Santos saw them in her light for split seconds. Pale figures moving with impossible speed, using the cave topology like a jungle gym. Every time she aimed, they were gone. Her remaining team clustered together, but that's what the family wanted. Grouped prey was easier to control. Then the lights went out. Not malfunction, but systematic destruction. One by one, their tactical lights shattered, broken by thrown rocks with sniper precision. In the growing darkness, the clicking communication grew louder, more excited. The hunt was entering its final phase. Santos felt something brush past her in the blackness, gentle as a mother's touch. A child's voice whispered in her ear, "Don't worry. We keep the strong ones alive longest. You'll feed many generations. Your sacrifice will help us grow." Emergency flares revealed the nightmare. They were surrounded, not by dozens, but by hundreds. The Utah family had grown beyond anyone's estimation, spreading through the underground like a virus, each generation more adapted to this life than the last. And behind them all, in a chamber that opened like a throat, Santos saw the matriarch. What had once been the eldest Utah daughter was now something evolution would have taken millions of years to create, perfected for one purpose: the continuation of the hunt. The last transmission base camp received was Santos screaming coordinates, begging for napalm strikes, for the entire mountain to be sealed. Then static, and underneath it, that eternal singing, promising that the hunt would never truly end. Lieutenant Marcus Webb was one of only 6 who survived the initial attack. Separated from his unit, he crawled through maintenance shafts barely wide enough for his shoulders, following the screams of his teammates. What he found in the great chamber below defied sanity. The Utah family had gathered for what they called reunion. Hundreds of them, maybe more, filled a cavern lit by phosphorescent fungi that grew in patterns too deliberate to be natural. They moved like a single organism, each member knowing their place in the hierarchy. And at the center, on thrones made from human bones, sat the elders. Marcus had seen the old photographs of the original Utah family. These things bore only mockery of resemblance. Generations of inbreeding and evolutionary pressure had created beings that used the human form as a loose template. The matriarch's neck extended like a swan's, allowing her head to turn in full circles. The patriarch's arms had grown long as an orangutan's, fingers fused into climbing appendages. But it was the children that broke Marcus's mind. The newest generation didn't even pretend at humanity. They skittered on all fours, joints reversed for better cave navigation. Their eyes had grown huge, pale as cave fish, seeing in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. When they spoke, it was in harmonics that made his teeth ache. The captured officers were brought forward, dragged by teenagers who moved with ritualistic precision. Marcus recognized Santos, Johnson, Kim, others from his unit. Alive but broken, fight drained by whatever horrors they'd endured. The family examined them like livestock, running those terrible fingers over muscle and flesh, determining value. The matriarch spoke, her voice carrying despite barely rising above a whisper. She told the story of their family, how they'd been chosen, blessed with gifts that separated them from the weak flesh of humanity. How each generation grew stronger, more perfect, closer to what humans were meant to become. Predators, survivors, the inheritors of the earth. When soft civilization finally fell. "You call us monsters," she said, head rotating to look at each prisoner. "But we're evolution accelerated. We waste nothing. Honor every kill. Your people destroy for sport, poison the earth, kill without eating. We are pure. We are the future." She explained their breeding program, how they'd carefully introduced outside genetics, kidnapping those with desirable traits, keeping them alive long enough to contribute to the bloodline. Marcus realized with growing nausea that some of the creatures surrounding them had human parents who died screaming, watching their offspring feed on their flesh. The reunion had a purpose beyond gathering. It was selection time. The family would choose which prisoners would feed them immediately, which would be stored for lean times, and which lucky few would be kept for breeding. The matriarch's ancient eyes studied each captive with scientific precision. "This one," she pointed at Santos with a finger grown long as a pencil. "Strong genes, good bones. She'll birth hardy offspring." Santos screamed as they dragged her toward the breeding chambers, caverns Marcus glimpsed filled with horrors that made death seem merciful. The selection continued. Johnson for immediate consumption, his fear making him tender. Kim for storage, her small frame meaning she'd last longer. One by one, fates decided with casual cruelty. When they reached Marcus, hidden in his vent, the matriarch paused, her head tilted, nostrils flaring. "We have a watcher," she announced, and every head in the cavern turned toward his hiding spot. "Come down, little mouse, join your family." Everyone joins the family eventually. Marcus had one grenade left, one chance, as hundreds of pale eyes fixed on his position. As bodies began climbing toward him with spider efficiency, he made his choice. Not to fight, not to run, but to ensure this horror couldn't spread. He pulled the pin, whispering a prayer for the souls about to be freed, and for forgiveness for those he couldn't save. The explosion collapsed part of the chamber, but as dust settled and the family's inhuman screams echoed through stone, Marcus realized the awful truth. He'd barely dented their numbers. And now they were angry. The matriarch's laughter followed him as he crawled deeper into the vents, knowing he'd only delayed the inevitable family reunion. Marcus found Kim and Private Davis hiding in a ventilation chamber, both trembling from shock. The explosion had bought them time but also revealed their position. Throughout the tunnel system, the clicking communication grew frantic, organizing a hunt that would end only one way unless they found an exit fast. Kim had managed to grab a service map during the chaos, her hands shaking as she spread it out. The main entrance was sealed, blocked by tons of rock from Marcus's grenade. But there were other ways, older passages that connected to natural cave systems. One led to an underwater river that supposedly emerged 3 miles north. It was their only chance. They moved through maintenance tunnels, following Kim's navigation. Behind them, sounds of pursuit echoed like nightmares given voice. The family wasn't just chasing. They were herding, using their knowledge of the tunnels to guide the survivors towards something specific. Marcus tried not to think about what waited ahead. The first body they found told them they were on the right path. A park ranger from the 1990s, preserved by the cool cave air, missing pieces but clutching a waterproof compass. Someone else had tried this escape route. The scratches on the walls grew more desperate the deeper they went. Messages from the doomed. "They're playing with us. Can hear them." Laughing. "God forgive me for what I saw in the nursery." Then they found it, the nursery Kim's predecessor had written about. They hadn't meant to, taken a wrong turn in their panic, and stumbled into Hell's kindergarten. The chamber stretched beyond their flashlight beams, filled with horrors that would have broken medieval torturers. Victims hung from the ceiling in cocoons made from their own clothing, kept barely alive by tubes feeding them sugar water mixed with their own blood. The family had learned to make their food source renewable. But worse were the hybrids, the experiments, the attempts to breed human and Utah together. Things that should never have drawn breath, muled in cages made from femurs, begging in languages that mixed human words with animalistic sounds. Davis broke, fell to his knees retching. That's when they took him. Hands erupted from the floor, a trap door hidden beneath collected bones. He screamed once before being pulled under, the sound cutting off with wet finality. Kim grabbed Marcus, pulling him away as more trapdoors opened, pale figures emerging like corpses from graves. They ran blind through corridors that all looked the same, following the sound of water that promised escape. The family let them run, enjoying the chase, calling out in voices that mimicked their fallen teammates. Santos's voice begging for help, Johnson laughing about something from last week's poker game. But underneath the mimicry was always that clicking, that hunger. The river chamber opened before them like salvation, an underground waterfall plunging into darkness. But between them and freedom stood three of the youngest generation, the ones born in darkness who'd never known sunlight. They didn't attack, just watched with tilted heads, studying these strange creatures who walked upright and feared the dark. "Pretty," one said, pointing at Kim's hair. Its voice was almost human, almost innocent. "Mother says we can't eat the pretty ones right. Away. They make the best breeders. Their fear seasons the offspring." Kim's scream echoed as she jumped, choosing the unknown waters over certain horror. Marcus followed, the cold shocking his system as the current grabbed them. Behind, the children laughed, calling out, "Swimming won't help. We know where the river goes. Family is waiting." The water dragged them through stone tubes barely wider than their bodies, lungs screaming for air that came in gasps between rapids. Marcus caught glimpses of things in the water, pale shapes that might have been albino fish or might have been reaching hands. The family had adapted to every environment in their domain. They burst into moonlight, gasping, the river spitting them into a calm pool surrounded by forest. For a moment, sweet relief. They'd made it. They'd escaped. Then Marcus saw the eyes reflecting from the tree line, hundreds of them, and understood the horrible truth. The Utah family hadn't just claimed the caves. They'd spread throughout Alabama's wilderness, and this river was just another pathway in their territory. The escape had been allowed, planned, because the hunt was more fun when prey thought it had hope. Marcus and Kim reached civilization at dawn, stumbling into a gas station covered in mud and blood. Their story so insane the clerk almost didn't call the police. But when Sheriff Hensley arrived, his face went pale. He'd hoped this day would never come, the day the Utah family stopped hiding and someone survived to tell about it. The FBI descended on Coleman County like locusts, bringing specialists, scientists, and enough firepower to wage a small war. They sealed the mine, pumped concrete into every known entrance, deployed seismic sensors to detect movement underground. The official report classified the Utah family as a terrorist cell, their victims attributed to a serial killer ring. The truth was too terrible for public consumption. But Dr. Patricia Hayes, studying the medical records she'd saved, made a discovery that turned the government response from containment to panic. The Utah bloodline had markers, genetic signatures that could be traced. And when they ran those markers through databases, they found matches across 7 states. The family hadn't just been breeding among themselves. They'd been spreading their seed for decades, creating a hidden population that carried their gifts. Marcus watched the investigation unfold from his hospital bed, Kim sedated in the room beside him. They'd found something in her blood, markers that suggested exposure to pheromones that altered brain chemistry. The Utah family had evolved ways to mark their prey, to make them compliant, even sympathetic. How many people had been released over the years, thinking they'd escaped, only to return voluntarily when the conditioning took hold? The abandoned Bryce Hospital became command central for Operation Cleansing, the government's attempt to map and contain the Utah spread. But for every tunnel they sealed, 2 more were discovered. For every confirmed family member found, 3 suspects vanished into the wilderness. The network was vast, organized, and learning. They intercepted communications, suggesting the family was abandoning Alabama, spreading to new hunting grounds before the net could close. Martha Whitfield died in her sleep 2 weeks after giving her testimony, her house untouched except for a child's drawing left on her pillow. The same stick figures eating, but now they covered the entire page, spreading beyond the circle, reaching toward crudely drawn cities and towns. A promise, a threat, a future. Sheriff Hensley retired immediately, moving to Canada without forwarding address. His final report noted strange births in rural hospitals, babies born with too many teeth, eyes that reflected light, an appetite for raw meat that worried doctors who were quickly reassigned. The genes were spreading faster than anyone imagined, hidden in the general population, waiting for the right conditions to fully express. Marcus tried to return to normal life, but the dreams wouldn't stop. Every night, he heard that clicking in his walls, saw pale shapes in his peripheral vision, felt watched by eyes that belonged to no human face. Kim disappeared from the hospital one night, her room's window open, small handprints on the sill. They found her car at the forest's edge, doors open, her medication untouched on the seat. She'd gone back, called by something in her blood that civilization couldn't cure. 6 months later, Marcus received an envelope with no return address. Inside, photographs from trail cameras across the southeast, pale figures moving through forests in Georgia, Tennessee, the Carolinas, abandoned buildings with familiar symbols carved in doorways. Missing persons reports that matched the old patterns, and a map showing tunnel systems that connected state to state, an underground railroad for humanity's new predators. The final photo stopped his heart. Kim, standing at a cave entrance, cradling something wrapped in cloth. Her eyes had changed, pupils dilated, that same hungry smile the family wore. The thing in her arms moved, too many limbs shifting beneath the fabric. The next generation, carrying genes from outside the family, stronger and smarter than before, evolution accelerating beyond control. The note attached was written in a child's hand. "Thank you for bringing her home. The family grows, the family spreads, the family endures. We are everywhere now, in your towns, your cities, your bloodlines. You fed us for so long without knowing. Now we feed ourselves." The reunion never ends. Marcus burned the photos but kept the map. Someone had to know, had to track them, had to warn the world. But late at night, when the clicking started in his walls, when shadows moved wrong outside his windows, he wondered if it was already too late. The Utah family had won through patience, through evolution, through hunger that transformed them into something beyond human. And somewhere in the darkness, between civilization's lights, they sang their hymns and sharpened their teeth, teaching their children the old ways while adapting to the new world. The legend of the Utah family was ending, but only because they weren't legends anymore. They were neighbors, strangers, the things that bumped in the night. They were the future, and they were hungry. Before I let you go, I've got to know, are you team burn it all down, or team maybe they're just misunderstood? If this story kept you up past your bedtime, or made you side-eye that weird neighbor who only shops at night, then slam that like button like you're sealing a cave entrance. And subscribe to this channel because tomorrow I'm dropping another story that'll make you grateful for your normal, non-cannibalistic family. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when ancient curses meet modern technology. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them.